Darkness in Ridgefield. When justice overthrows corrupt power. The city of Ridgefield lay in eerie silence as the sun dipped behind its historic buildings. Streets that were once bustling with life now carried a somber, oppressive air. Residents locked their doors before nightfall, avoiding the watchful eyes of those who were supposed to protect them. No one spoke of it aloud, but everyone understood. The police no longer stood for justice. Dressed in a perfectly pressed uniform, Police Chief Marcus Calloway strode confidently through the courthouse hallway, flashing a powerful smirk at those who turned to watch him. At his side, his three most trusted officers, Lieutenant Daniel Ricks, Sergeant Ethan Connors, and Officer Julia Mayfield, walked with the same air of untouchable arrogance. To them, the law was nothing more than a game they had mastered, manipulating it for years without consequence. But from the corner of the room, someone was watching. A woman with a calm demeanor but piercing eyes, Vanessa Holloway. No one in that courtroom knew her name. Not yet, but within a few hours, the world these officers had built would come crashing down, and she would be the one to pull the curtain back, exposing the truth. They believed they held absolute power. But true power never belongs to those who manipulate. It belongs to those who dare to reclaim justice. Ridgefield was once a peaceful town, where the police and the people coexisted in harmony, working together to build a safe community. But everything changed. Under the control of Marcus Calloway, the police force was no longer a symbol of justice. It had become a money-making machine for a select few. Calloway was the mastermind behind it all. He didn't need brute force to rule. He wielded power and connections. With his polished appearance and smooth words, he convinced the public that he was a model leader. But behind closed doors, he was the kingpin of every illicit operation in the city. Serving under him was Lieutenant Daniel Ricks, a towering brute with a short temper. If Calloway was the brain, Ricks was the fist. His job was to clean up problems, whether it was silencing inconvenient witnesses or dealing with officers who dared to speak out. Anyone who opposed the system met with accidents, false charges, or simply vanished without a trace. Then there was Sergeant Ethan Connors, the man who manipulated records and erased trails. Every critical report passed through his hands before reaching higher-ups. He could make evidence disappear, release dangerous criminals, and bury scandals beneath system errors. And finally, Julia Mayfield, the young officer with an innocent face and bright, trusting eyes. But appearances were deceiving. She was the system's eyes and ears, infiltrating the community, gathering whispers, and identifying potential threats. Anyone who asked too many questions or got too curious about the police was quickly flagged and reported to Calloway. Under their control, Ridgefield became a place where justice was nothing more than a distant illusion. The wealthy and powerful were protected, while the poor were nothing but prey. Major crimes were covered up. Notorious criminals walked free within days, and honest officers were either pushed out or forced into silence to protect themselves and their families. But no system is perfect, no matter how carefully constructed. In the shadows, some had begun to whisper the truth. The first cracks in the foundation of Calloway's empire were beginning to show. And in a quiet corner of town, a journalist named Alex Carter was piecing them together. Alex Carter was no hero. He was just an ordinary journalist, a local news writer for the Ridgefield Tribune, a small town paper that rarely covered more than weekend fairs and high school football games. But one day, he began to notice something unusual. Ridgefield had once been a peaceful town, but over the past 3 years, crime had skyrocketed. Theft, violence, and, most notably, drug trafficking had become rampant. Strangely enough, the real masterminds behind these operations were never caught. Arrests were limited to low-level criminals, while the true kingpins roamed free. Alex started digging. He discovered that crucial evidence in major cases had a habit of disappearing. Files were mysteriously lost in the system, and reports were accidentally damaged during processing. Even more suspicious, certain police officers seemed to be living far beyond their modest government salaries. Lieutenant Daniel Ricks had just bought a luxury car. Sergeant Ethan Connors owned an expensive lakeside apartment, and Police Chief Marcus Calloway had a bank account with funds no one could explain. He wrote his first article, Darkness in Ridgefield, questioning why every major case had the same pattern: missing evidence, no convictions, and silence from the authorities. The article gained attention immediately. But instead of answers, all he got was silence. Then came the threats. First, a phone call in the middle of the night. A gruff, low voice warned, "Stop now, Carter. Stay out of things that don't concern you." Next, he found his car tires slashed outside the Tribune's office. One evening, as he arrived home, a chilling message was scrawled in red paint across his front door. Knowing too much is dangerous. Alex knew he had stumbled onto something far bigger than he had imagined. But instead of backing down, he decided to dig even deeper. He sought out those who might know the truth: a retired police officer, a prosecutor who had once tried to launch an internal investigation, and an anonymous informant who claimed to have damning evidence. But they were all terrified. No one dared to speak. Except for one person, a woman who had moved to Ridgefield only a few months ago. She called herself Emma Reeves, a historian working at the city archives. She seemed oddly interested in Alex's story. But the strange thing was, she knew too much. Vanessa Holloway was no historian. But that was the identity she had carefully constructed: Emma Reeves. A scholar from out of town, here to study Ridgefield's archives. She arrived quietly, blending into the background, spending her time at the library, small cafes, and local community events, gradually becoming just another face in the town. In reality, Vanessa was a seasoned FBI agent, assigned to infiltrate the Ridgefield Police Department and expose its deep-rooted corruption. Alex Carter's articles had drawn federal attention, and the Bureau needed someone inside, someone who could obtain the kind of evidence that left no room for doubt. The first time Vanessa met Alex Carter, it was in a small diner. The kind of place where everyone knew each other. She played the role of an intrigued outsider, pretending to admire his work, carefully crafting a conversation that would earn his trust. Alex was skeptical at first. A historian interested in Ridgefield's police force? That's a little unusual. He took a sip of his coffee, watching her closely. Vanessa merely smiled, adjusting the thin-framed glasses she wore for the role. History isn't just about the past, it's also about what's happening right now. And I think what you're investigating is a part of history that some people would rather bury. That was enough to keep him talking. Slowly, Alex started sharing pieces of his investigation: missing files, silenced witnesses, cases that led nowhere. Vanessa listened, committing every detail to memory. But she never revealed who she really was. She knew that Calloway and his men were hiding something massive. But if she wanted to bring them down, she needed more than Alex's reports. She needed undeniable proof: recorded conversations, illicit transactions, hidden warehouses where their stolen money was stashed. Then, a lead surfaced. From Alex's sources, a location kept coming up: a supposedly abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Ridgefield. A place where officers frequently visited, yet no one knew what went on inside. Vanessa made a decision. It was time to get inside. But what she didn't realize was that someone else was already watching her. Julia Mayfield, Ridgefield PD's young officer with an uncanny instinct for spotting outsiders. Vanessa thought she was investigating the corrupt cops. But now, they were investigating her. Night in Ridgefield was eerily quiet. The streetlights flickered. The wind whispered through the narrow alleys, carrying a bone-chilling stillness over the town. On the outskirts, an old, abandoned warehouse loomed in the darkness, covered in dust and rust. To most, it was just another forgotten structure. But Vanessa Holloway knew better. This was the heart of the town's corruption. The clues she had gathered from Alex Carter and the townspeople all pointed here. This was where secret deals were made, where confiscated evidence was sold back into the streets, where bribes were exchanged, and crimes were orchestrated under the guise of law enforcement. If there was any place to find the proof needed to take down Marcus Calloway and his men, this was it. But Vanessa couldn't just break in like an FBI agent. She was still playing the role of Emma Reeves, an outsider with no ties to Ridgefield. So, she chose a riskier move: infiltrating from the inside. She started spreading whispers in local bars and among small-time dealers, rumors of a wealthy investor looking to buy her way into Ridgefield's underworld. At first, no one paid attention, but soon, the right ears perked up. "Do you actually have money?" a low-level dealer asked, his eyes skeptical. Vanessa smirked, pulling out a thick stack of cash. "I don't do small talk. I need protection, And I hear the police here are very accommodating." The message traveled fast. Soon, it reached Lieutenant Daniel Ricks and Sergeant Ethan Connors. They wanted a meeting. A time and place were set, Friday, 11 p.m., the abandoned warehouse. Vanessa knew this was her chance. But it could just as easily be her death trap. Blank. Underscore, blank. Friday, 11 p.m. Vanessa pulled into the warehouse lot in an old, nondescript sedan, just another drifter in town. Dressed in a leather jacket and low-cut boots. She looked every bit the big city player she was pretending to be. But hidden beneath the facade, she was armed. A discreet camera in her necklace. A recording device stitched into her collar. A single flickering bulb illuminated the empty lot. 3 figures were waiting inside. Daniel Ricks stood tall, arms crossed, his massive frame exuding intimidation. Beside him, Ethan Connors was as cold and calculating as ever, holding a briefcase filled with forged documents and contracts. A third man, a local dealer acting as a middleman, lingered in the shadows. "Who the hell are you?" Ricks growled. Vanessa didn't flinch. She stepped forward, dropping a bundle of cash onto the table. "I'm someone who can make you a lot of money. But I need to know the cops here aren't going to be a problem." Ethan Connors smirked. "Cops aren't a problem in Ridgefield, as long as you know how to play by the rules." The deal was set. Ricks laid out the terms, a monthly payment for protection. In return, Vanessa's fictional operation would have free rein, no raids, no warrants, no unsolved murders. Everything was going exactly as she had planned. Until a voice echoed from the entrance. "What the hell is going on here?" Vanessa turned. Marcus Calloway. And beside him, Julia Mayfield. Blank. Underscore, blank. Tension thickened instantly. Mayfield's sharp eyes locked onto Vanessa. Suspicion written across her face. "You look familiar," she murmured, taking a step closer. "I've seen you somewhere before." Vanessa's heart pounded, but her expression remained cool. She leaned back, giving a casual shrug. "Of course, you have. I live here. Or do you usually forget the faces of the people you protect?" Mayfield hesitated, but doubt still lingered. Calloway stepped forward, studying Vanessa with that calculating stare of his. Then he smirked. "You say you're an investor? I don't do business with ghosts." "Julia, check her background." Vanessa's pulse quickened. If Mayfield dug too deep, she'd realize Emma Reeves didn't exist. She had to get out, now. Blank. Underscore, blank. Vanessa kept her composure, lifting her bag and flashing a careless smile. "I get it, you're cautious. I respect that, but I don't have time for an interrogation. I'll be back when you're ready to talk business." Ricks stepped forward, eyes narrowing. "No one said you could leave." Without hesitation, Vanessa kicked the table forward, knocking the only lamp to the ground. Darkness swallowed the room. Shouts erupted. Ricks lunged, but Vanessa was faster. She slipped past him, shoving Mayfield aside, sprinting toward the exit. The unmistakable click of a gun echoed behind her. Bang! Pain seared through her shoulder as a bullet grazed her. But she didn't stop. She threw herself into her car, slammed the door, and floored the gas. As she sped into the night, headlights flashed in her rearview mirror. The men she had just deceived were realizing what had just happened. They had let a fox into the henhouse. And what they didn't know yet was that Vanessa had recorded everything. She had the proof. And Ridgefield's reign of corruption was about to come crashing down. Darkness in Ridgefield. When justice overthrows corrupt power. The dawn of a new Ridgefield. The first sunrise after the arrests brought an unfamiliar stillness to Ridgefield. No more eerie sirens wailing through the night. No more quiet dread when a police cruiser rolled past. The city had changed. The once untouchable figures, Marcus Calloway, Daniel Ricks, Ethan Connors, and Julia Mayfield, now sat in federal custody. Shackled and awaiting trial. The power and wealth they had hoarded for years had crumbled in a single night. Vanessa Holloway, the woman who had worked in the shadows for so long, no longer hid her identity. She was more than just an undercover agent. She was now the director of the FBI. The very force that had dismantled one of the most insidious corruption networks in the town's history. As she stepped onto the podium at the national press conference, her gaze was steady, not just at the reporters before her, but as a warning to anyone who thought they could manipulate the law without consequence. Justice is not reserved for the powerful, it belongs to everyone. And there will always be those willing to stand up and defend it. Alex Carter, the relentless journalist who had refused to back down, became a symbol of fearless reporting. His stories, once confined to the Ridgefield Tribune, were now featured in national newspapers. His work inspired a new wave of journalists, young writers unafraid to venture into the darkest corners of the truth. And Ridgefield, once suffocated by corruption, was reborn. The police department was restructured, with honest officers finally given the authority they had once been denied. Citizens, long silenced by fear, began to reclaim their voice. Town hall meetings overflowed with engaged residents. And for the first time in years, people believed their voices mattered. The lesson from Ridgefield was more than just the fall of corrupt figures. It was a testament to the power of truth, courage, and those who refused to bow to the darkness. Vanessa Holloway knew there were still more Ridgefields out there, places where shadows still ruled. But she also knew one undeniable truth: wherever corruption existed, there would be people like her, like Alex, and like the citizens who refused to stay silent. Because justice may be delayed, but it will never be denied. The first sunrise after the arrests brought an unfamiliar stillness to Ridgefield. No more eerie sirens wailing through the night. No more quiet dread when a police cruiser rolled past. The city had changed. The once untouchable figures, Marcus Calloway, Daniel Ricks, Ethan Connors, and Julia Mayfield, now sat in federal custody, shackled and awaiting trial. The power and wealth they had hoarded for years had crumbled in a single night. Vanessa Holloway, the woman who had worked in the shadows for so long, no longer hid her identity. She was more than just an undercover agent. She was now the director of the FBI. The very force that had dismantled one of the most insidious corruption networks in the town's history. As she stepped onto the podium at the national press conference, her gaze was steady, not just at the reporters before her, but as a warning to anyone who thought they could manipulate the law without consequence. Justice is not reserved for the powerful, it belongs to everyone. And there will always be those willing to stand up and defend it. Alex Carter, the relentless journalist who had refused to back down, became a symbol of fearless reporting. His stories, once confined to the Ridgefield Tribune, were now featured in national newspapers. His work inspired a new wave of journalists, young writers unafraid to venture into the darkest corners of the truth. And Ridgefield, once suffocated by corruption, was reborn. The police department was restructured, with honest officers finally given the authority they had once been denied. Citizens, long silenced by fear, began to reclaim their voice. Town hall meetings overflowed with engaged residents. And for the first time in years, people believed their voices mattered. The lesson from Ridgefield was more than just the fall of corrupt figures. It was a testament to the power of truth, courage, and those who refused to bow to the darkness. Vanessa Holloway knew there were still more Ridgefields out there, places where shadows still ruled. But she also knew one undeniable truth: wherever corruption existed, there would be people like her, like Alex, and like the citizens who refused to stay silent. Because justice may be delayed, but it will never be denied.